What fresh hell is this?
Get it, let's get it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm a little impressed.
I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I need that camera to pan around. I need the whole view of this place.
Yes, sir. In case you guys don't know, in case you don't know, you're now listening to
Come on now.
the Hour of Power. That's right. This is the Revival Hour. Tell a neighbor, tell a friend. We're coming to you, blasting that old goodness. Come on. Praise him, praise him. We're coming to you bringing a show full of, I guess I call it our variety show. But dude, tell a neighbor, tell a friend, post it and tell them this is the Revival Hour, the Hour of Power. We're just your garden variety skeptics, jerks, assholes.
I'm about to say a-holes. Keep it clean for the first 5 minutes of YouTube.
Yeah. A-holes. We're gonna have, in case you guys didn't notice it, we got a guest here for Exit Strategy. We got Elder Albert Kim. The session has met, and we decided he should join us. What did they say next? The Holy Spirit saw fit to set apart Albert Kim for today's exit strategy.
The unholy spirit.
I guess we'll go in. We're going to get into, I guess, some comments from the previous week.
We sure are.
Oh, yeah, by the way, Tuesdays are no longer exit strategy night, for those who are wondering. If you want this good old Oregon goodness, you're going to have to check in on Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I think that's about that. I'm going to go ahead and get some aphorisms together. I guess I'll turn it over to Elder Brady.
Well, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to Exit Strategy. Happy Thursday. And if you're watching it on a day other than Thursday, happy day.
I forgot my normal greeting. I always say it's Exit Strategy featuring our host, Brady Goodwin, and his trusty sidekick, Jay Witt.
Sidekicks
and we
tonight,
say,
plural.
Yeah, exactly. And his sidekick, Albert Kim. And we always say we welcome our friends and our enemies. Oh yes, we welcome our enemies. You think we're your enemies, but we're really your friends.
Yeah.
All
if
right.
we didn't
Sorry
care, we
for
wouldn't be
cutting you
doing
off,
this. Oh, good.
Exactly.
If we didn't care, we wouldn't be doing this.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to read a couple of comments from Nurch. We just had Nurch this past Sunday. We were in Romans chapter 9, and the title of the episode was "For God So Hates the World." And Jay Witt made an excellent point that we've made before on this channel, which is if you're going to name someone by the attributes that they're most commonly known for, I mean, take Jesus, right? Jesus said, for the road that leads to life is very narrow. Few there be that find it. The road that leads to destruction, many are going to find that way. But then in Romans chapter 9, we saw that there's a God who's behind what's going on here. He's predestining, he's calling, he's electing, he's choosing, he's loving, and then he's hating. So is most of humanity going to experience his love or his hate? Well, according to Romans 9, most of humanity is going to experience his hate. So why are we calling God a God of love when the majority are going to experience something else from him? So in that episode, we had a few people make comments, and Wims Sweden commented, "You guys are always making us think thoughts we haven't thought before and see things from new perspectives. Thank you." David Divad 777 said, "Saving this for my long run later this week, training for a marathon," but dropping in a comment for the algorithm. So I said, I responded, "He's running while listening to Nurch." I said, "Man, you're choosing pod of people talking over music. It's a rare breed." But we got people who are driving trucks and delivering mail and running marathons while they're listening to this podcast. So more power to you guys. Zay Green said, "Great, so profound. Thank you. Lots of new perspectives raised, but particularly liberating for me is the observation that contrary to today, when the scientific method is used to support arguments, rhetoric," and then I also added in storytelling, "was used in the ancient days. Seeing the Bible as the foremost apologetic work is a major contribution to the unshackling of my mind." Thank you so much for that comment. One more. Shout out to Jaywitt and Albert. "It's kind of something I really respect when people realize that logical thinking is not obvious. Like if you are trained in a different society that uses different argument styles, that is also a form of intelligence. My logic vastly improved until I sat down and studied formal, but I had access to information. Paul might have just been educated differently. He was clearly intelligent, if a bit unloving and harsh." Do yourself a favor. If you have not caught the episode, go back and check out the episode, because you'll see what these comments are referring to as we're looking at what Paul is doing and how it's even impacting him as the author to be concocting this new theology, what it's doing to the way he has to see himself and his people according to the flesh. So great comments. Jaywitt, you got any aphorisms for us?
Yes, sir. Today's aphorism is from an Irishman. He was born in 1854 and he died in 1900. His name is Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde.
The first one. The first one we'll read says, "Bad art is a great deal worse than no art at all." I'll read it again. He says, "Bad art is a great deal worse than no art at all."
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
What say you?
I'm going to throw it to Al first.
That's I mean, I guess I don't know. I like to laugh at bad art. So there's enjoyment that comes out of that already. But I guess if he's thinking about something that you can have an experience with, then yeah, I guess I can see that. Yeah, sure. What do you think?
Why would it be better than no art at all, though? Bad art is bad art because it's bad art, but why better than no art?
It's hard. It's very subjective, so it's a little hard to. It's a little hard for me to really have a definite answer on that. But,
okay, I think I have one.
Yeah,
I think I do. I do think the idea of bad art is a strange idea because, like you said, it is subjective, right? I define art as a reproduction. Like all art is a reproduction of something. Even if it's not a chosen subject, even if it's impressionist art, even if it's art that's meant for you to figure out, well, here's what I think it is, or it's still trying to get you to determine what it's reproducing. So if it's a bad reproduction, that can be very subjective. Somebody could think it's a good reproduction of one thing, and it could be a bad reproduction of something else. So that's what makes it subjective. But I like the idea that bad art is worse. No. What is it? Say it again. Bad art is
Worse than
bad art is a great deal worse than no art at all.
Great deal worse than no art at all. I can see that simply because.
I'm curious.
Go ahead.
But go ahead. I don't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah. Great deal worse than no art at all. I think at least if there's no art at all, you're still left with your faculties. You're still left with your own ability to imagine, your own ability to translate things and to describe things to yourself, as opposed to somebody else's poor representation of something. So I think being a great deal worse than no art at all is now, not only are you giving me a reproduction of something, you're robbing me of my own reproduction of it because you've given me a poor one. So that's where I would go with it.
Yeah. I'm curious about this word reproduction that you're using. Like, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Could you elaborate? I don't want to spend too much time. I just want you to elaborate on it.
Well, think of any artwork. Anytime you see a work of art, you do one of two things. You either try to say what it's a reproduction of, that's a horse, that's a sunset, that's whatever. Or you begin to talk about what it reminds you of. It makes me think of something. So the art always invokes. It could be a feeling, a sentiment. The art invokes something so that when you see it or when you hear it, think about this. I think there's a song back in the day, I'm So Hood, DJ Khaled, right back in the day. That song is not the hood, but it's a reproduction of pride for the hood. Anytime you see or hear a work of art, I think it's doing one of those two things. It's calling to mind something because the artist did a good job of representing it or reproducing it, or it's eliciting from you what you think it's a reproduction of. That's the way I look at
it. That seems a little narrow for a definition, but I don't want to do it over that.
No, feel free, push back. No. Let me ask you this. Is there any art that is not in some way, shape, or form a reproduction of something or meant to elicit the reproduction in your own mind of a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's art they call non-objective art. Yeah, but let's not get into that. Okay. I think the second half of it, better than no art, is worse than no art at all. I think one thing we can deduce from this is that Oscar Wilde has a certain kind of ennobling and high view of the role of art. So much so that he thinks if you have what he considers to be bad art, it's worse than not having made it at all. In other words, I think he thinks of bad art as having an inherently deleterious effect on, I guess you could say, a society or culture. Anyway, that was the only thing I would consider.
Well, no, but think about this. Hold on, I want to stay there for a second because I think this builds for what we're talking about. Think about the statement, all art is propaganda. Think about what C.S. Lewis and Gerald Tolkien tried to do with their stories, right? If art is propaganda, you could, if art is meant to convey a message of some kind, if it does a poor job of conveying the message, or if you don't hide your hand well enough, like Tolkien told C.S. Lewis, it's too obvious what your allegory is about. The propaganda doesn't work when it's too obvious. I think
Brady, do you accept that assumption, or do you accept that proposition?
Which one?
The art is propaganda. I'm just curious if you're.
I don't know if I accept it, but I think it definitely can be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to say that it's bad propaganda, I do think there's a way. Like coming from a former Christian.
That means Narnia is. Well, anyway, that's all. Right.
So coming from a former Christian rapper, that was one of the conversations we used to have. Is if your message is too out front, is it bad art just because now your message, like no one's going to listen to your message because they already know from the door. That's why Lecrae stopped doing quote unquote Christian rap, because as soon as people heard it was Christian, they didn't even want to hear the art because they already thought, well, I know what you're saying already. Well, then that's bad art in that kind of a way.
Yeah. It's ironic that we have a former. Go ahead.
Should I go? Because I wanted to, because the thing is, I never thought that the stuff that you did,
Mm,
and I got into Tim Brindle for a while too. I to me, I didn't actually consider it bad art,
mm,
really, and
mhm,
I think maybe what part of what some people might cringe at is the idea that there is anything religious to the content,
mhm.
whereas I thought that it was. I don't know. I think the fact that there was this very kind of underground
Mm,
element to it, and then the fact that it was like very intellectualized at the same
yeah.
time
Well, I was
was
gonna
a
say, I think it was in to a degree, I think it was good art, but it was also good preaching, and you had an affinity towards preaching.
I may, but I thought it worked as a
Hmm.
juxtaposition. When you juxtapose the two together, it
Hmm.
made for kind of a zany
Yeah.
kind of object to behold.
Yeah.
And I think in that way it could actually be justified as good art, or
Okay.
or as something worthy to at least pay some attention to.
Hmm.
Because I think it was a cultural phenomenon that was like really unique to the genre, to the academic space in some ways, and then
Yeah.
the church, and then it's like a weird blend of everything, and then it's almost
Yeah.
like I almost think that, like, why hasn't anyone talked about the phenomenon in that
Well,
kind of subculture?
well, we're gonna
So
see this tonight.
right.
There's something to the art of hiding what you're doing that helps it work. But then
Mhm.
there's also a different version where you sort of just come right out and say it.
Right.
And
Right.
it's not artistic at all.
Yeah,
Okay. Right. Okay. Yes.
yeah.
In that sense, yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and in light of what we went through on Nurch this past week, don't you think? Would you guys say that in a similar way to the reprobates showing God's grace in a greater degree? Would you say the bad art acts as a as the black velvet to the good art? I mean, is it a necessary component for us to appreciate good art more? And it's the same way the reprobates are necessary
Mm,
for us to appreciate the
Okay.
mercy more, right?
That's
mm,
that's a funny
But
analogy.
anyway,
Okay,
that's
good.
yeah.
yeah. I'm being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Let me go to the second aphorism. The second aphorism.
Sure.
I'm being ridiculous. Um. Uh. So Oscar Wilde says, "What is a cynic? Okay, a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing." I'll say it again.
Hmm.
He says, "What is a cynic? A man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing."
Hmm.
I think I generally agree with that.
Hmm. Why? What about it resonates with you?
Because I think cynics are a lot of cynicism that you might encounter is born out of a real kind of understanding of how people might suffer, or uh, the cost in which the bargain doesn't make sense. So
Hmm.
it's easy to be cynical in that sense, and you can really try to understand it to some degree, where um, you can understand that transaction, or how that reciprocity doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
But I think the effort to actually go underneath and then do the labor and hard work to understand why the outcome is in that manner, in such a way, is a lot more deliberate, and I think
Hmm.
it's much harder to
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's harder to be a cynic. I think the more you try to understand things as they are,
Right.
and the
Or
complexity of
just
things.
in light of what the aphorism actually says,
Yeah.
the second you begin to and see this almost gets back to the question of art, because to know the value of nothing, are you talking about things that have intrinsic value that you don't know the value of? Or are you talking about a subjective you not having a value in certain things or in anything at all? Is it just an
I see.
appetite? Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll cut you off.
No, the question was, is it an apathy that's just a universal, like sort of like nihilism that makes you a cynic? so that you have no personal values, or is it the person who doesn't recognize intrinsic value that becomes the cynic? That's the question that I would have for what he's actually saying there.
Right.
What I'm noticing in it is him contrasting value with cost. So he's distinguishing value from cost or from price.
Right.
And he's saying that that the person who falls on the side of cost all the time, that's the cynic. The person. So you pay for a vacation. There's a way to go on vacation where the value of the vacation is a whole other matter from the cost of the vacation. Because the value is something that it's almost priceless in a sense. Like, how do you put a price on looking your loved ones, your little child in the eyes while he's or she's at Disney World and enjoying themselves? You'll pay, in other words, there's some things you'll pay almost any amount of money for, but the money, the cost of it, the price of it isn't equal to the value of it. You see what I'm saying? So I think I'll stop there. I could keep giving illustrations, but I think what he's trying to say is there are some people who walk through life and they're engaged. They're not seeing the bigger picture. They're engaged in just the rubber meets to the road, just the cost, the analysis of it in terms of how many pennies does this end up costing me? And the other person is thinking of things in terms of in a more noble way about like the value. Like, you can't always assess value the same way you can account for the cost.
Well, anyway, we can spend time on that. Maybe we can come back to that, because I think that would be a good question for people who have deconverted. Do you become cynical because you fail to see intrinsic value in things once you have detached from a God gives value to life kind of worldview? Or are you saved from that by your own, subjective as it may be, just personal values? And is that what saves one from cynicism? Like, I have this conversation on Facebook all the time with people that ask me, so then what's the meaning of life then? As if, the person who detaches from their theism no longer can find value in anything. But that's something I think we can come back to. This episode is titled "White Christian Nationalists Say the Quiet Part Out Loud." Jay Witt, you sent me this video, and you sent it to me and Al. And as soon as I started watching it, I got maybe about 7 minutes in, 4 minutes in, and my jaw dropped to the floor because I'm like, are they saying this stuff in a quiet, in a empty room behind closed doors? And then I heard the people in the crowd responding favorably. I'm like, oh shit, they're saying this stuff. Like, not only are they being recorded saying it, they're saying it in a room full of people who agree. And I just was like, yo, we got to do an episode about this. Jay, why did you send it? Like, what, before we dive into the particulars, like, what made you say, hey, check this out, fellas?
Real quick note to you. You did find the second video that we spoke about this afternoon, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's great. So I sent it to you guys. I sent it to you guys because, it was, as I watched it and I saw him saying, one of the speakers in the video saying something, I found myself, I guess it was the idea that the person was bold enough to say it out loud, like, in a society, 2024, we're much more sensitive to anything that looks like bigotry. The idea that this person was unabashedly just spouting out just really bigoted stuff in a auditorium, it sounded like almost full of people who were more or less cheering it on. I said, this is a worthy conversation, and of course I'm half of the clips that I play at the beginning of Exit Strategy are, look at your former selves, such were some of you, the idea that you don't have to be associated with those folks anymore. You can kind of laugh at a distance. when I watched the video, I do remember a time where I would have had to do the hard work of trying to see how I could embrace these people as brothers and sisters
Right.
while simultaneously like totally disavowing everything else they were talking about. So it was a real genuine struggle. The more diverse my circle of Christian friends got, and I ran into types like that, it became a genuine struggle because I had to constantly say, okay, we're united by our belief in Christ's substitutionary work on our behalf. Or, just, reading about Jonathan Edwards' defense of slavery, for instance, in the light of abolitionists. Just stuff like that. You just start, I can't even put it in words. I don't want to make this intro too long. But basically, it was that idea.
So that reminds me, Jay Witt, of I heard Tim Keller say in either a sermon or I can't remember, but he was reading, I forgot what passage he was reading, but the takeaway for him was that he he was just sharing with his constituents. It's like, isn't it crazy? It's like I have more in common with a racist, like person from the South, who just spews all this like hatred because of my union with Christ than a fellow non-believing New Yorker, where I live. And I heard that and I was like, it's like, oh my God, it's like I didn't like that. Like it just didn't never sat right with me.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
It's just, yeah.
I think I remember hearing things like that when I was in church. Like, this idea I'm going to be in heaven with the slave owners who whipped my, great grandmother or whatever. And I don't know, I guess, and this just goes to show you, for those who want to say you guys weren't believers, I remember doing the spiritual work, like Jay Witt talked about, doing the labor, the spiritual math, whatever, and just having this high premium, this high value of what the blood of Christ was able to accomplish for forgiving that person for their sin and me for my sin and all that, and saying amen to that kind of shit. Like, yep. That's the gospel. That's the gospel.
I remember reading John Gresham Machen's book, Christianity and Liberalism, because all of the Christians in my circle thought he was this great thinker and stuff. And then I think it was well after I had read the book, finding out he was this virulent, like racist, like this horrible guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, like just finding out he would have never saw me as his equal. And this is the cognitive dissonance that the Christian has to perpetually, he has to exist in perpetuity. The particularly the Black American Christian, or has to live in a certain kind of cognitive dissonance if he's going to embrace evangelicalism, American evangelicalism, or I should just say evangelical, because it's an American phenomenon. And I guess that's why some of them, I guess like Lecrae and others, they try to find a different tradition of Christianity to like plant their flag at, because they okay. Let me just
the video that we're about to go into would definitely have spurred Lecrae's and all the others to find a different kind of Christianity to plant their flag in, because the guys that we're about to watch, I don't know how popular many of these guys actually are, but they are acolytes. They are under the tutelage, at least philosophically, of one of the premier. I've never really watched much of his stuff. You guys know much more about him than I do. But the guy, Doug Wilson, would you say Doug Wilson? Well, I don't even know if I should ask this question. These are Reformed Christian pastors. And, for a good while, the urban Black Christian hip hop community was snuggling up next to these types of pastors, because it was sort of seen as the Black church was so emotional, so charismatic, and not really word-based enough, that groups like my former group, Cross Movement, and people like Lamp Mode, when we started, some of us came out of Bible colleges, out of seminaries, talking a very intellectual very heady
Mm-hmm.
kind of Christianity that made us sort of strange bedfellows with these kinds of reformed pastors. Not all of us were reformed. Some of us were. Some were semi-reformed, but we just liked having an intellectual component to our faith. We liked, if we're supposed to be giving a reason for the faith that we hold, it just seemed that the reformed cats had a lot more reason to give. And so we would have been closely connected to some of these guys, but then Trayvon Martin's, dies. You have Mike Brown, you have the whole Black Lives Matter thing pops off. And you start seeing Black Christians sort of dividing from white evangelicalism, because back in those days, this is mid-2010s, some of us begin to sense that these white evangelicals, when Lecrae got the backlash for talking about Trayvon Martin and talking about, all this stuff, we begin to sense, as some of us begin to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and the white evangelical community reacted, many Black Christians began to say, wait. I thought we were good. It don't seem like y'all got our back on the social justice side of things. And then they started using, a lot of the white evangelicals started using social justice warrior as a pejorative against people who were concerned about social issues, particularly Black and brown issues of justice. Well,
I'm sorry. You're saying, well, so I know you think you remember your point, or do I need to?
Yes, I remember. No, go ahead.
All right. So I was just going to interject and say that there were rumblings even before BLM and all of that years ago, because I remember, because of people, there were rumblings because at these conferences, you had Together for the Gospel Coalition, you had Desiring God. You had these American reform-ish pastors who would speak in that circuit. And one of the people who started getting invited around was Doug Wilson, who's sort of like the progenitor of this neo-Christian nationalist movement.
Okay.
And Doug Wilson wrote a book many years ago called Black and Tan. And it's essentially an apology. It's like an apologetic for American slavery. It's
not an apology, not an apology, an apologetic, which is different.
Yeah, so
I wanted people to catch that correction.
Yes. So he's essentially it's a revisionist look at the classical sort of presentation of American slavery. So, and it's one where he sees the benefit of slavery for Black Americans. And I remember it was years ago. This is long before the Black Lives Matter movement. There was a doctor, I believe he's a doctor, Dr. Anthony Bradley, was on. He was calling. I think he may have called Piper out. Now this is a little fuzzy, but he was calling them out for.
Anthony Bradley is an African American graduate of Westminster Theological Seminary, where I graduated from, a rare breed. But go ahead.
Yes, and he's an intellectual. He's a writer. He's very well versed in just church polity and et cetera, et cetera. He goes on the attack. I think he got invited to Desiring God at some point. I just remember he didn't like the fact that people. Go ahead.
Jay, what I could clarify. So I think what you're referring to is he got invited to Redeemer with John Piper. So you had Keller, Piper, and Anthony Bradley on, as the speakers. So I think is that what you're referring to, Jay? What?
I think there were at that time there were several incidents, and on Twitter he was really coming at Doug Wilson. He was coming at Doug Wilson because he was being platformed by ministries like Desiring God, and he was like, have you guys looked at this guy's oeuvre? Have you looked at the fact that he has a book called Black and Tan that's an apologetic for American slavery? And just say, and so what it caused is them to have the conversation because
got it.
This is we don't need to get to
because I was trying to give the backstory for what we're about to watch. I didn't know about this part of the backstory, so this is all good. I'm curious, do either of you know what was the response from the evangelical community when Anthony Bradley called out Doug Wilson like, hey, you guys are platforming this guy who's given an apologetic for American slavery. What was their response?
I believe they had a sit down, and I think there were some blogs. This is like during the era of blogs. I think they were blogging back and forth, like Bradley, and so I don't believe it ever got. Obviously, it never got resolved. Wilson. I don't think he's ever denounced any of the views. I might be wrong. If you guys know in the comments, you guys can comment on this video. But as far as I understand, he's never disavowed those views he had of American slavery.
As far when I did a little research, he dug in his heels, and was accusing everybody.
Dug in his heels, huh?
Dug in his heels.
No pun intended. Yeah.
Okay,
but I mean, this is the problem. I remember going to a Reformed church and hearing my pastor at the time, because that's where I was a member, quote a Confederate soldier, and I don't want to say which one I think it was. I think he was a very prominent Confederate soldier, and he quoted him referencing his piety before the battles that he was going to. So, like, because those who don't know, many Reformed Blacks don't even know this, or maybe they do and they just don't look into it much. Many of the Confederates were actually Reformed types. They were like these Confederates, like racists. They
Southern
believed in the
Baptists.
sovereignty in it. No, I'm saying like Presbyterians. Like,
Okay.
I'm talking reform. Like this is prior to like this sort of hybrid Baptist reform. This is the era of like the 19th century. So these guys would go into their battle, and the pastor I was under, I believe he was quoting a guy. He was referencing his habits of prayer before the, like the battles, gods and whatever. And it was like he was quoting, he was talking about a Confederate. So I just remember sitting there and listening and just being like, but anyway, that's just incidental and we need to move on. So,
my point was going to be, well, fast forward. So you got Doug Wilson being platformed by all these evangelicals, Anthony Bradley calling the evangelical community out like, yo, do you know what this guy's talking about? I said this on Nurch, or maybe I said it last week on Exit Strategy. Tim Mills, who runs the YouTube channel Harmonic Atheist, plans on running for president in the near future. His hope and goal is to be the first atheist American president. One of the things that's spurring Tim Mills to run is he has been personally affected by a member of his family, his wife, who was discipled personally at Doug Wilson's church. And he says he knows full well the plans that people like Doug Wilson have for the country, for America to be a Christian nationalist country. And so the people that we're about to watch on this platform, like I said, these are acolytes, these are disciples, these are people who are under the tutelage of a Doug Wilson. And you're going to even hear one of them talk about, hoping that whether or not Doug would approve of the way he's handling things, because that's how much these guys look up to him. Well, these Reformed pastors at this conference, the conference is called New Christendom, which is another way of saying Christian nationalism. And so we're going to hear them speak on 4 different topics, and we're going to stop it to talk about the things that they're saying, and you'll see why my jaw dropped to the ground, why Jay Witt sent it to us. And that being said,
well, let's just note very quickly that old Christendom was a really bad idea. That's all I gotta say.
This is Christendom 2.0.
2.0.
All right. Here they go. All right. So let go. If you can't hear it, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to let it play.
The 30,000.
Oh, hold on. It says loading.
Yeah, it's still loading.
It normally doesn't take this long to load. So, all right, here it is. You see it?
Yes.
Okay.
Foot view, you're like, are you guys really going to pick on Ali Bastaki? Come on. And so I think it's helpful. One, I don't think that we should needlessly pick on her at all. But secondly,
background real quick.
Can you make it full screen, Brady? Or you want to keep us on the side there?
I want to keep us on the side. Yeah.
Okay.
Is it just very small? Let me see.
It's fine. It's fine.
I just made it full screen. That should be better.
That's better. Yeah,
that's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a Christian by the name of Allie Beth. She made he's going to tell a story about how he, particularly the guy who's speaking, ended up in a verbal online back and forth with Allie Beth. And you're going to hear just their views on on women. So we're going to stop it. Yeah, gender roles. We'll stop it, but he'll tell the story.
I think the context is helpful. The only reason that guys like me and Eric started to address Allie Beth at all was initially, and this sounds like a fairly effeminate thing to say, but she started it. And what I
so just right there,
okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what he just did was he said something very childish, but phrased it as something very effeminate.
Yeah.
How'd you end up in this back and forth with this woman? Well, she started it, but and I know even in saying she started it is an effeminate thing to say. No, it's not effeminate, it's childish. But that just goes to show you what he thinks about women.
Right, exactly.
Right?
They conflated childishness into femininity.
Right.
Right.
But it's a very paternalistic idea of women in society.
I think the context is helpful. The only reason that guys like me and Eric started to address Allie Beth at all was initially, and this sounds like a fairly effeminate thing to say, but she started it. And what I mean by that is, so the context is, it was about almost a year ago at this point, probably 10, 11 months, that I had members of my church who were sending me, sharing a particular podcast episode that she did on Relatable, and I was listening, and she was giving examples of, like, yes, I'm complementarian, here are my bona fides, but, right, the yes, but kind of thing, but there's this.
I just need to explain real quick. This woman, Allie Beth, she says, yes, I'm complementarian, but either one of you want to explain real quick what complementarian means in their context?
Al, do you want to take a go at it? Because I could.
No, go ahead, Jaywood. Yeah.
So you have egalitarians. This is an issue that almost you don't hear discussed outside of a very specific kind of Christianity. It's not only American evangelicalism, it's also Reformed evangelicalism. It's people who will double down on those pseudepigraphic Pauline epistles, the ones where he's telling a woman that she shouldn't speak and that kind of thing, and and that kind of the people who are going to double down on that are what they call complementarians, and they do the language it sounds positive. You say complementarian. The idea is that you have very distinct roles that are complementary to each other. Now, obviously, the man is at the head, the woman's at the bottom, or the tail, or whatever you want to call it, and it's like, just think of all of the stuff that's reserved for leadership,
authority,
being at the helm,
responsibility,
etc. Yeah, exactly. Responsibility. All of those are ascribed to those traits are ascribed to be set aside for men, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the women are. This is brand. It's a matter of branding. Using the word complementarian is a branding thing, because they're saying, okay, instead of saying you're a subordinate, because they you can use that language, it would sum it up just fine to say these are the subordinates. Or whatever.
Exactly.
But they say complementarian because it says essentially it's you're subordinate to the man. All of your roles, they're the opposite. So authority, lack of authority. Leadership, lack of leadership. You're basically at the bottom of the totem pole or whatever.
And the flowery
egalitarian.
Well, I was saying the flowery part of it is you compliment what the man does, not compliment like, "Hey, good job, honey," but you're there to add the feminine flavor to what he's doing. You don't do what he does.
Yeah, those are homophones. Compliment, and when you're using it for color or whatever, you're talking about something different than
Right.
just making a compliment to someone. And basically when he's saying, yes, your role is usually when you think of something that's compliment, you're saying, all right, I have a steak. The gravy is the compliment to the steak.
Right.
It's adding something to it.
Right. But
here,
the steak is the
this
main
not
deal.
The steak is the main.
Yes, the
right.
steak.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess it does follow. That's a good illustration, but
Right.
it's not even that good in this sense because they really just mean you get the leftovers. That's what
Right.
when they
Whereas-
say when they're saying compliment. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to just the point you were about to make a minute ago, whereas egalitarian means you could switch the male and the female out in terms of who's playing
Exactly.
what role. And
Right.
the woman that
more efficiently than I could have. Yes.
the woman that they're talking about, she starts off with this piece that she wrote saying, I'm not egalitarian. I don't think women can play men's roles. I'm complementarian.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, this is really good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean,
the-
even in that
Mhm.
that qualifier that she puts, you're seeing a certain kind of psychology going on.
Right.
Like she's
I'm playing
she's
by you all's
qualifying
rules, is what she's saying.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not saying we're trying to step onto your leadership and authority territory. I'm not an egalitarian. I'm a complementarian. But go ahead, Brady.
Yeah. So I just wanted people to understand when this woman starts off saying, hey, I'm complementarian, but that means something in their community. So let's let them go on.
And I think the only thing I would add to that, I believe they use Philippians 2 a lot to try to legitimize it because they talk about within the Godhead how Christ is subordinate to the Father,
Right.
Right.
and he's still
Right.
equal with him. So they would use that a lot. But go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
That I had members of my church who were sending me, sharing a particular podcast episode that she did on Relatable, and I was listening, and she was giving examples like, yes, I'm complementarian. Here are my bona fides, but right, the yes but kind of thing. But there's this, this growing, sinister movement that really is toxic and machismo and blah blah blah. And here's an example. And I was really curious to hear what the example was. It was me, So then she began to read, an excerpt from a pastor that, and I appreciate she didn't name me, but I'll name me because I thought it was a great sermon. But but she began to read an excerpt, and I was like, that's really familiar, and it's verbatim my words. And I realized, man, when she says something about patriarchy, this is the point. When she says something about the dangers or extremities of patriarchy, she's not talking exclusively about someone like Andrew Tate. She's talking about us. That's what.
So what you're seeing here is these men are feeling threatened because anything that sounds too woke to them, anything that's going to give women a place other than the place that they believe God or Paul has designated for women, that's threatening them. And so you're starting to see what caused this rift between him and Allie Beth. But he's saying it's not just me, it's us, guys. We're being threatened here.
But he's also not recognizing that in the real world, you can have overlap between you and Andrew Tate and not be Andrew Tate. You see, that's being lost too. He's like, yeah, maybe you share a lot of ground. You might not be engaging in human trafficking like Andrew Tate, but maybe you do share some ideology. I mean, you know what I mean? Like this, there's a lack of, anyway.
Yeah.
And when she says something about patriarchy, this is the point. When she says something about the dangers or extremities of patriarchy, she's not talking exclusively about someone like Andrew Tate. She's talking about us. That's why we had to address it, because first and foremost, before we're podcasters or media, whatever, we're local pastors, and we had women in our church, and I'm sure you did as well, who were listening to her podcast, which is perfectly fine. At least it was, up until 11 months ago. But now that I have actual households, husbands and wives coming and saying this person that we trust in the Christian sphere is raising concerns about our pastor, which makes us concerned. And that's when I realized, oh man, I didn't want to, but I'm going to have to go there. So.
Yeah, that's helpful. Brian, I want to ask you, then we'll get Dr. Rigney on here. We had a really good discussion about this the other day. For people who are wondering, like, what's the principle behind this? Is there a principle? Just kind of like.
So pay attention to this, because they're going to talk about what's so bad about what Allie Beth was doing. Why was she okay to listen to 11 months ago for women or even husbands and wives in this church, but not now? So they're looking for a biblical principle that will give them reasons to say, hey, we need to address this. So watch this.
Lay that out for me. Why would we, vis-a-vis Zach Garris, I think it's ladies in the Commonwealth, and what's the role there would be some of the reform principle here, William Googe, you mentioned. Correct? How would you fill that out?
Yeah, really briefly, and this is something I think virtually everybody, even people that might have disagreed about some of the tactical situations, what to say, how to say it, where to say it, that kind of thing, would pretty much agree that generally we're not aiming to put forward a model of femininity that is primarily engaged in pugilism, political leadership, leadership in the home as the head of the home, pastoral leadership in the church, doctrine guarding kind of authority, instructional authority, and then in the Commonwealth as well.
So I don't know if you caught that. He says what we're looking for is a model.
Right.
Well, because he worded it weird. He didn't answer it positively. He answered it negatively. He says, we're not trying to put forth a model of femininity that da 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 da. So it almost could confuse you. Like he actually is telling you what they want by telling you the reverse. We don't want women who are going to be playing these kinds of roles. And he starts naming them.
Yeah. It's like saying there were not a few of them, like in Acts. There were not a few of them. It's
right.
Like you're saying
Right.
there's a lot of them.
Exactly.
In reverse.
Yeah. So somebody might have missed what he's saying here. The things he's saying negatively is basically him saying we don't want women doing the following things. But he's going to name a bunch of spiritual things. But then he's going to say, but then also not just in the church or house, he throws in there on the tail end. Also, in the secular world, we don't want women doing these things.
Yeah.
So, I'll play it again.
In pugilism, political leadership, leadership in the home as the head of the home, pastoral leadership in the church, doctrine guarding kind of authority, instructional authority, and then in the Commonwealth as well.
In the Commonwealth as well. That's their way of saying in secular society, we don't want women in these roles. Al, I'm just curious, when you heard this part, what were you? My mouth dropped right around here for the first time. There's more egregious stuff, but any reaction?
Yeah. So far, I mean, yeah, obviously this is if you go to a church like MacArthur's, you're exposed to a certain version of complementarianism. And I was never around people who were this extreme, and I'm sure people in that church though did go this extreme though. Like that's where, but I didn't associate with them necessarily, but yeah, I'm just like I couldn't believe what I was hearing because I think I've been away for it so long, and most of my coworkers are women. I would say the amount of coworkers I have, it's like 70-30, women to men. So just the fact that I've been deconverted for this long, but
well, hold on, because since you said that, let me ask you both this question. When you were Christians, had you heard this kind of talk, what do you think your response would have been?
I heard this kind of talk when I was a Christian, for sure.
Yeah, I heard.
Did you amen it?
I had a I had a soft amen to a lighter version of it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I always had an inner discomfort with it even then. So go ahead, Jay Wood.
Such were some of you, such were some of you. I mean, I was a Reformed Presbyterian Christian. So I was in a conservative denomination. So of course the the pseudepigrapha I referred to earlier, I thought those passages to be authentically Pauline, and of course they were talking about women not being in leadership and stuff. And yeah, I believed it because it was in the Bible, you know. So that's what I thought that was. Now, in terms of him extending it into the secular realm, they didn't teach that in the church that I was at. They would have said it was totally a spiritual thing. It has to do with spirit, like male, like leadership. They would have said in the home, in the family, because Paul addresses that. But you know, I'm kind of a little caught off guard that you took that down, because I was going to make a joke about the a-hole starter kit that they all must have had, because they all were wearing like cowboy boots, and they had like waxed mustaches and big beards. I was like, yeah, I guess this is part of the whole, you got to wear a blazer and jeans or whatever, you know.
Sorry. I'll be honest with you guys. I think I said this to Jennifer Bird when I had her on, or I don't know who I said this to, but when I was a Christian, when I heard this kind of talk, I did amen it, and I did so selfishly because I liked the fact that it had this order where God was over Christ, Christ was over man, and man was over woman. Yeah, I took a certain I took a certain kind of pride in, okay, that's my role. I'm over her. And I don't think I would have ever, I mean, I've dated lots of Christian women, but if any of them did not have that, like if they did not agree to that order and jump at the idea of wives submit to your husbands, if they had some kind of qualifier to that, like this kind of talk, I think it really does play to the ego of men. And it's men who wrote this kind of shit back in the day. So it makes sense that it would.
Yeah, agreed.
It's like honestly, you know, this would be a quick comment. His conflating childishness into femininity, it shows you what they think of, like, it really is a demoting of womanhood, which is adulthood, essentially.
Yes.
To that of being a child. So you treat, you basically, if you just insert child for every time they use woman, it still works. So that gives you a sense of how they think of women. They think of, a child is never challenging to your authority. You're naturally over the child.
Yeah.
A child doesn't get to lead the nation. A child doesn't get to teach out of the scriptures. A child doesn't do discipline. All of the things that are true of children, essentially. And I don't think it's incidental that when he thought of childishness, he just immediately told a joke, and he's like, yeah, I know this sounds like, you know, a little effeminate. And it's like, no, you're saying you created
but the room laughed.
Yeah, the room laughed. So
that tells you something.
Yeah, tells you a lot.
In his mind, femininity or effeminate, all of those kinds of words are synonyms for basically childishness or children. You know, like you know, I think it's just, I just think that's worth pointing out.
Well, stay tuned, folks, because it gets worse than that. So pause for a second. We got a $5 super chat from J.M. Smith. Says, in the 80s, acceptance into white evangelical circles meant being politically conservative like Dr. Tony Evans. Otherwise, you were too black. Think about that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
All right. Scott, back in. Here they go.
But these guys, you gotta look at this panel, and in a time when inclusion is kind of celebrated, look at that panel. It's like they're leaning heavy into the white male patriarchy. You know what I mean?
Well, they're going to name it in a minute. So yeah. A little bit more on the woman side of this conversation, but then we'll go on to the other aspects of it.
That we want equally interchangeable men and women serving as kings, congressmen.
He's saying this is what they don't want now. Okay, so just let me take it back a couple seconds here.
What to say, how to say it, where to say it, that kind of thing, would pretty much agree that generally we're not aiming to put forward a model of femininity that is primarily engaged in pugilism, political leadership, leadership in the home as the head of the home, pastoral leadership in the church, doctrine guarding kind of authority, instructional authority, and then in the Commonwealth as well. The ideal is not that we want equally interchangeable men and women, serving as kings, congressmen, senators, presidents, but that God has actually ordained, both in their nature and then also by positive instruction in Scripture, that men ought to take the lead role in these things. And so, generally speaking,
women shouldn't be in Congress. This is crazy, yo.
That's crazy. That's nuts.
This is insane. When I heard this, I looked around
what's
like,
the problem, Brady?
I mean, like, is this some sort of bizarro world? Like, you guys are really thinking this in 2024 and saying it out loud.
God damn.
speaking, there are we see Deborahs and things like that, but generally speaking, we're not aiming to put forward a model for our people to say, hey, ladies, you should aspire to be a full-time political commentator engaging in political pugilism in the public sphere.
And when Brian says pugilism, just for anybody who may not be aware, like what we're talking about is not just the content in terms of her message and what she's covering, but the tone. And I know that may sound hypocritical. It's like, what? You're like, don't
tone policing.
Right, yeah. Don't you guys get upset when people tone police? But it really is different for, when you think of 1 Peter and what's said about women, the beauty that is imperishable, beauty of the heart, not just merely external, that's pleasing in the sight of God, is uniquely and explicitly defined as a quiet and gentle spirit. And so,
pause. Can you pause?
Oh my goodness.
This is why we got to get these texts the fuck out of here, man.
Yeah,
because like you feel like so long as you can quote some passage from some ancient ass text, now you have a rationale to base like some really asinine idea on, and it's like, get the fuck out of here. I don't care what, like, you could quote from Harry Potter or whatever else the hell. That's not going to legitimize. Like, that's why, for those who wonder, I remember one Christian said, why are you guys deconstructing Romans? Precisely. Because if we can show it's BS on its own terms, now you don't get to just pick it up and quote it to buttress your asinine ideas. Because that's what he's doing here.
Exactly.
Like, he recognizes this is a thing I'm saying, but guess what, guys?
It's in the book.
Got a text that I'm basing it.
It's in the book. Exactly.
And it's like, this is why those who are counter apologists and those who know the text, we have to consistently show how the text is full of BS. The arguments are bunk. None of it makes any sense. So that when people do quote it, like, look, I got this back, and you're like, yes, you just quoted another irrelevant text that exists in the world.
Great.
All right, that's it.
Great.
That's it.
No,
That's
great.
the Jay Witt rant for the night.
So,
go ahead.
yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, to what you said, Jay Witt, I think even when you just follow what they said, because they'll quote scripture, but even how they try to make that justification and formulate it doesn't quite, because I think he said at that part, it's like the way God made women in their nature.
Yeah.
But it's like anybody here who has worked with, women in the workplace, or, who's had a partner, or anybody, you've seen leadership qualities. You've seen them, be extremely articulate, to command the attention of a room, to you do essentially everything that men can do. I mean, there's no and in fact, maybe statistically with less aggression than men. So anyway, that's what I'm going to say. We could continue on.
It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad that it pulls us into this sort of apologetic for women, which reminds me of when like I think it was Kanye who was trying to do a defense for gays back in the early 2000s. He's like, a lot of them are good designers. It's like, what are we talking about? We should not have to try to have like it to bolster. Okay, they make some of the dopest clothes. It's like, who the fuck? Like, what are we talking about? Like, they are human beings. Like, why are we like to even engage this? You know how like they say, I will not dignify that with a response. To even engage this conversation on a certain level is to dignify it. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do that. Number one, even for a man, he needs to be mature, right? So Doug Wilson has a whole book on, like satire, the serrated edge, really, really helpful. And in that, Doug Wilson had several caveats, not even applying to Allie Beth, but to Joel Webben. Like, I remember reading the book and feeling convicted and thinking, Doug might actually say that I am too young, that I actually should be doing this half the amount that I currently am, that I need to get 15 years more under my belt before I levy the barrels of satire, you know, as frequently as I do. And so that was, it was really helpful for me. But for a woman,
Hold on. Let's laugh and talk after this because he's going to make a point about that.
It's not, yeah.
All good.
So,
Doug might actually say that I am too young, that I actually should be doing this half the amount that I currently am, that I need to get 15 years more under my belt before I levy the barrels of satire, you know, as frequently as I do. And so it was really helpful for me. But for a woman, so a man may do it. A woman, I really believe, must not do it. And so it's one thing to just have your conservative political commentary with occasional theological truths, and there's an argument to be made about genuine concerns biblically even with that. But when you're naming men, so even if it's terrible men like Joe Biden, but you're a woman and you're naming men and using snark, that's not gentle, it's snark. And then when those same barrels, right, so I could even be hypocritical and inconsistent and listen to Ali Beth have a zinger on Joe Biden and be like, yeah. And then though, 11 months ago when those barrels got turned on Reformed pastors, the same snark, the same satire, the same sarcasm, the same not quiet and gentle spirit, now levied against pastors. That's when I realized, oh, wait a second, we got a problem.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
this is so paternalistic, man.
Oh gosh.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
It's cringy. It's so cringy, you know?
A man may do it. A man may be snarky. But a
he
woman
might have to wait for another. He might have to wait for another 15 years, actually, right?
Right.
But
a man may do it, but a woman must not.
Yes, she must not.
I'll put my money on the fact that his wife or another woman in his congregation can do the snark better than him in a more mature way, in a more funny. I don't know. If he thinks he's not mature, then what does that? I mean, what does that say about him as a person? So, anyway,
yeah,
he sounds like a very insecure man. Like any guy.
All of this is insecurity.
Yeah, very insecure. Yeah,
like
yeah.
Oh, when she hit Joe Biden with the zinger, I could say, yeah. But then when she turned it on Reformed pastors, I'm like, right. Oh, we've got a problem.
We've got a problem.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In the same way.
In other words, like with people though. So she shouldn't be slinging it at Joe Biden either, right? That's his conclusion.
Right.
His conclusion is, yeah, we thought it was funny when she did it to our common enemy. And then when she turned it on, so we realized, oh yeah, that's right. She shouldn't have been doing that either, because that's not the character of what the hell are you talking? Like what?
But crazy. I mean, think about it. In the same way, remember we talked about the whole compliment thing, right? The complementarian. Well, let's use the other definition of compliment. He thinks he's complimenting women to say, no, it's beautiful in the eyes of the Lord when she has a quiet and gentle spirit. So if you want to know, now granted, you've never seen the Lord, you've never heard from the Lord, you've had men, patriarchal men, tell you what the Lord wants, and guess what the Lord wants from you? Surprise, surprise, the same thing I want. I want you to sit down and shut up. But God thinks that's beautiful, so do it.
How could you not hear a misogynistic voice?
Right. God just happens to sound just like your wildest desires. That's uncanny.
Oh my gosh, this is painful. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I can't, all you have to do is take any marginalized group and plug in, instead of woman, plug in that group, or just forget marginalized, the group you exist in. If he was talking about you, how the hell would that feel for you to have to sit and listen to a group of men we're going to dictate how an entire half of the human race should live on the basis, we're going to quote a passage out of a book. That's it. There's errors and all of the historical errors and everything else. We're just going to quote a passage, a verse here and there, and there you go. There you go. You got this is this is God's word, right? You know?
Yeah. Well, let's move on to their next topic. So we're going to go off woman now, because they don't just want to tell women how to live. They want to tell the nation how to live. So let me get back to my share. Where are you at? Oh, and by the way, if you're here, take a minute, like, subscribe, drop a comment as we keep it rolling here. All right, now they're going to move on to begin talking about nationalism.
Various plagues or invaders or something like this, and I think by all accounts, it seems clear and apparent to me we are a nation under God's judgment, from the economy being ruled by women, all sorts of matters.
Wait, I forgot
The hell?
that.
How's that a judgment? I don't understand. Help me understand.
So they start talking about America is clearly a nation that is under God's judgment. And one of his examples of that is that the economy is ruled by women. How do you fix your face to say that?
God.
Like, what the,
Yep.
like,
Let's take a little time to notice the Art Deco, like very Nazi-esque like logo. It looks like a propaganda poster. Like the fuck.
well, I looked at,
they're literally invoking evoking that kind of imagery. You know, it looks.
well, they
like
say
Art Deco. It looks.
the theme to this conference that they were at is something about Christian burials, but they said it was a call back to King Alfred, who is who's called King Alfred the Great, who is the Anglo-Saxon king of England in the 800s AD or CE. He became the king of Anglo-Saxon, I think, in 888. He was the king of of the West Saxons before then. And this guy is known for defending England against the invading, who was it that invaded? The Vikings. Converted the leader of the Vikings to Christianity, and then put all these reforms in place, where he actually had this whole myth drawn up that had his family traced all the way back to Adam. So they had this kind of biblical hierarchy of why they were the rightful kings, rightful rulers. So this conference, even they're giving some kind of call back to this Anglo-Saxon king. So it's kind of fitting for them to be talking about Christian nationalism here. Just think about that.
Yeah.
That imagery is
I would just
intentional.
love it. I would love it if you could just drag this in Photoshop and put like a video game console, and it's just like these are just a bunch of fucking idiots sitting around like a television playing a video game, because that's what it is. Essentially, like they got the guy on the logo looking like them with longer hair. Like they're cosplaying. They got like beard. Like, what the fuck is going on here, man? Like he's got to say, it's like, what is this? This is clearly a joke, you know?
All right, let's let them talk about the nation that's being judged by God, clearly because women are running the economy, whatever the hell that means.
Whatever the hell that means.
Yeah.
That would indicate that. And so, as Christians, how should we respond to a nation under God's judgment? There are some who might advocate for a more accelerationist, like get out quick, let's go. I don't think that's most prudent to our neighbors. I think that we need strong calls for repentance for people from their sins at all levels of society. And so we need...
Brady, did you catch what he said?
I caught a few things.
Us getting up and leaving isn't prudent for our neighbors. Like they need us here with this bullshit. Like, we can't leave. Like he's like, it's like Paul. I would like to leave, but it's better for you that I'm staying. Right? Remember Paul was like, remember what he said? Right. It's good for you that I'm here. It's like, I'm a gift to you, my neighbor. It's like, no, actually, we would like it just fine if you just like left.
Well, he says what we need, though, is to call this nation to repentance. And he's going to talk about this idea of, now just think about that. According to Christian doctrine, do you think you're going to have a sinless nation ever? No, right? So what good is it going to, like, let's say you call the nation to repentance and the nation actually repents. How long do you think it is before, I mean, what is the Old Testament about? The judges, they're going to talk about the judges in a minute, right? What is the cycle of the judges? People not being able to do what we think they should as often or as well as we think they should. And so you end up in these cycles of, oh, damn, we did good for a while. Now we're back to this again. What does he think is going to happen if you call the nation to repentance and they repent? God's going to, heal the land and then it's going to be happily ever after?
Well, remember, Brady, they're post-millennialists, so they might think, right.
Okay.
So
I didn't take that into account.
I don't think you never got your eschatology together before you be converted.
I didn't. Yeah.
Maybe you need to go back and review the eschaton and then deconvert again.
But they're going to.
I was middle. I got my eschatology together before I did for the record.
Right. They're going to make that same point later on, that no matter what system of government they put in place, it's not going to stick. So even they're not good millennials because they're not holding to even though they're going to talk about.
Well, they're post. They're
post.
Let me let them get there. Yeah. Let me let them get there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, are you playing?
That's what I'm wondering, Brady. I don't see. I don't see your screen. You got to.
Oh, okay. I stopped sharing. Sorry. Because if I don't stop sharing, then you won't see us while we're talking. So
yeah, I know.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, good catch. Good catch.
No one sees me anyway. No one can see my face.
No one has seen Jay Witt except the father. Anytime you guys see me sitting there when I'm supposed to be sharing something, call me out immediately because that means I think I'm sharing, but I'm not.
Okay, got it. It's sharing now.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Let's go. I don't think that's most prudent to our neighbors. I think that we need strong calls for repentance for people from their sins at all levels of society. And so we need, strong gospel preaching, and not gospel preaching that's minimal, but maximal in all the ways that America in our various locales, cities, towns, counties, states need to particularly turn back to the Lord. That's the only way out of judgment. And so that, to me, just from a pastoral perspective, is the way I kind of assess the situation.
That's sort of revisionist too, isn't it though? All of our cities, states, towns need to turn back to the Lord. What are you talking about? Back to sort of gives the idea that they were once all worshiping your God.
Yeah, well, they get into a little the Puritans and so forth in this video, if I'm not mistaken. Recall it, like we're talking pre-America, actually.
Yeah. They're going to talk about
they're harkening back to that.
Cotton Mather and all that. Yeah.
Yep.
From a broader conversation on whether it's a cold civil war or something like this, I mean, I think the end of the Cold War not ever going hot was probably best for the world, and I would hope for the same thing to be possible and pray for this.
So, did you guys catch that just there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What did you hear? Because no, that's worth stopping right there.
No, I mean, okay, because you want him to see us while we're talking.
Yeah. So he's talking about the Cold War being a good thing because there was this whole idea of the mutually assured destruction, which didn't go hot, so no one wanted a hot war. But he's using that as an analogy to describe how he wants to have basically just a kind of how should I say like an escalated kind of spiritual battle for
Well,
having.
well, not just spiritual, because he's talking about what's happening socially right now as a cold civil war that he's hoping doesn't go hot.
Correct. So he does. No, correct. Yeah. So that it doesn't go right. That it doesn't turn bloody, I guess, or doesn't.
Well,
turn
no.
into...
Well. Here's what's happening right now in this country. I forgot. In the chat, you guys know this. You know the guy's name. Who was it that just recently said? I think it was the guy who's behind the Project 2025. One of these right wingers said, the next American Revolution is upon us, and it will be bloodless if the left allows it.
Allows it. Yeah.
So this idea of a cold civil war is something that people on the right are saying it's actually here now, and it only will remain cold if the left doesn't put up a fight.
Yeah, I think it's important just so that we don't overstate their point. Go ahead, Albert.
It's a little confusing for me to say that, because from what I know about Project 2025 is that they don't want to have, they're trying to circumvent the legislative process,
right,
and try to implement it in some kind of
top-down authoritarian way.
But I think there are flaws to that strategy. If this is essentially what the Christian nationalists are, betting on, or even making it a hedge in some way. I don't know what you would call that in their sense, but overall, it's I think what's crazy about this is that that they I mean, are they essentially, they're not arguing for a republic, right? That I think you and I, Jay Witt, you can agree on that. It's like,
right,
they would really rather have.
Well, actually, one of them, the guy who's sitting, you guys can't see it right now. The guy who's sitting second to the left is going to say something that's going to call for, less of a top-down structure. It's still top-down, but it takes into account more than just what an authoritarian ruler would want. So it could begin to kind of sound republic, but more of a Christian republic.
Okay.
But the rest of them aren't saying that.
Yeah. These guys are all barking no bite. There is no cold civil war going on. I mean, these guys represent a minority within the minority, but
I don't know, Jay Witt. That's a conversation we need to have. You say they represent. You say there is no cold civil war. You saw what just happened a couple of days ago. There are very many people. Maybe this is a place to play the video he sent me, Jay Witt. Is this a good place to play the video?
I mean, but we have the other video. You have the panel. That's probably more important to get around to. Just as
only problem with that other video is it's 30 minutes, and I don't know where that clip is. We'd have to find it.
I'll get us to where we need to get on that video, but they need to see that, I think. But at the same time, I want us to. Yeah, I think there's so much more content in this actual video that the audience needs to hear. That I don't want to debate it yet.
Let's try to come back to the idea of whether it's a cold civil war or not. But we'll try to get back to that. Let's let him finish talking, because the more egregious stuff, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. So
yeah, we haven't scratched it. Nope.
Boy.
Hey, thank you guys for rocking with us too. We see you guys in the chat. Glad you guys are here. Play nice. Let's keep it going.
For the world, and I would hope for the same thing to be possible and pray for the same thing to be possible here. But I would always.
He's praying for a cold civil war, not a hot one.
Go back to how to get out of God's judgment. We return. We tear down the idols. We turn back, and that starts with each one of us and our churches and our families, and then it flows out from there.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I'm going to ask the guys over on the love seat. What time is it? What do we do? What should we be doing right now? Let's go with Brian.
So,
all I'm going to say to the viewers is brace yourself for some crazy shit.
I think that Stephen's answer is the most accurate and succinct way of putting it. That what we're talking about are civilizational enemies. And so when we're taking that, okay, that's a big category.
Just that language alone.
Right. That's dangerous.
Civilizational enemies, enemies of our civilization. He's talking about other Americans, particularly on the left side of the political aisle. They are civilizational enemies.
How do we live practically in light of that? It does mean that we have to respond in keeping with the level of what we're dealing with, within the vocations that we have. I think one thing, because there's so many ways you could go, but one thing that means is that we have to be slow to object about the fight looking like a fight, and that this is one of the things that frustrates public discourse on the matter. When we
pause.
No, I just was laughing.
Okay.
You know, Chase mentioned that we're dealing with some like feminized modes of engagement and feminization of culture, and public, political.
All right, you got to pause it real quick.
Okay.
Every time they say feminized, it's a negative thing. I mean, haven't you seen it? Like, how can they consistently say, "Oh, we're not saying women are lesser," and every time you use feminine or whatever, or effeminate or feminized, it's always negative.
Yeah,
it's like clearly.
Well, I think they would say it's not negative. They would say it's negative when men do it. It's okay when women do it. The things that are feminine.
He's talking about characterizing debates as being what did he says
feminized,
outwardly pugilistic or whatever, and people like the idea of when people say you should play nice, he's saying that that's feminizing language, and that you shouldn't have to argue or play nice, that you should be able to go to war in a very warlike way. And I'm just like, he's using feminized as a negative, like as inherently negative.
Feminized modes of engagement. Feminized modes of engagement for him are, I see your point. I see your point. I got you.
It's never positive in his world.
Brady, even your qualification, if a man is effeminate, why is that bad either? Right?
Because for in their worldview, we've got different roles. They're supposed to want to heal, whereas men, it's okay if we want to tear down.
Of course, but that's where I would challenge that assumption as well. So
I got you.
But I gotta let him cook. I'm gonna. If you hear me make a noise, I'm just laughing. I'm just letting him cook.
Some like feminized modes of engagement and feminization of culture, and public, political, all of these kinds of combative, pugilistic discussions, they're going to have a masculine edge to them, and so I would encourage, though, men to embrace masculine, lordly, humble, competent, godly leadership in whatever vocation and domain you have. Because that's the way that we're, like, if we're in the times of the judges and we have Allie Beth stepping up to the plate, that should be an immediate rebuke to the men.
Okay, you're right. Because if you don't know what he just said, he really did just diss women. Because in the time of the judges, the only time a woman steps up is Deborah, and most people of their ilk would say that was a judgment against the men, that a woman had to step up. And so if he says Allie Beth, if she's the one stepping up, that's Deborah in the time of the judges. That means men aren't playing their role if God's got to use a woman to do something. So, okay.
How does this not look like a fantasy and cosplay? Like they are constantly, they're walking through life. They're walking through life as looking at this fictional novel. Like, we're in the time of we're not in the time of the. What the fuck are you talking about? You're in America in the 21st century. What are you talking? It's like you can totally see these dudes are. They're practically orgasming off of the idea that we're in this is a civilization. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Civilizational enemies? The time of the judges, women stepping up. We gotta, it's like, it's all fiction. This whole entire thing that they are sitting here envisioning this is a circle of just childish men having fantasies right now. That's what you're looking at. This is not real life.
Well,
Yeah.
it gets worse. So let's let them cook.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yes, it does.
We should be saying, and not just pastorally, but like in all of your vocations, how can I, seek the earthly and heavenly good of my neighbor in the context of my dominion, as if we're fighting a civil
What'd you say?
I said, please don't.
Don't seek my good. Yeah.
Don't seek my good, brother. Please don't.
battle. And then on the other side, I would say we need to be slow to concern bro about be divisive and nitpicky about the way the fight is that it is a fight at all, that it's taking masculine strong engagement, that I would say I would discourage ladies on Twitter from getting involved in like policing the speech of pastors, trying to hey, everybody calm down, why is everybody fighting all the time? That's a really good feminine instinct, but you have to know what time it is and what domain they're functioning in. So there's so much.
These guys are stand-up comedians, they don't even know it.
Oh my God.
It's just like comedy, man. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, but we got to let them get to the nasty shit.
Yeah, we're gonna let them cook.
My mind goes, it's like, what's your vocation? Are you a man? Are you a woman? Or what do you do? Go fight like it's a civilizational issue there, right where you actually are, called by God.
Yeah, it's helpful. Joel, you're in Texas. Different scenario than Ogden, different than Moscow. How do you read the times there? And I guess, what are you calling your men and your people to be doing about it?
Well, Texas, there's urgency all over the nation.
So let me just say this real quick. Somebody earlier on in the chat said this guy looks like Matt Walsh, well, he's about to say some racist shit that will make you think maybe that is Matt Walsh.
Yeah,
should be.
Yeah.
Texas, if anything, exponentially should be all the more urgent. Texas is what? It's 40 electoral votes, I believe now. It was 36 once upon a time, but thanks to everyone leaving California, I think. But anyways, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so, yeah, good work. But the point is, we can't afford to lose Texas. And unless something drastically happens, I think 2028, Texas will officially be blue in presidential elections, in large part because of the border. So I don't know. What time is it? Like, there's the general large answer to that question, the big picture. But then there's all these isolated cases, and one is immigration and border states and our southern border. And so Texas is like, I walk around my neighborhood, and it's not that there are different shades of white and brown. Who cares?
You care.
I mean, like full straight up Hindu garb at our neighborhood swimming pool that my daughter is asking, and I'm trying to explain. She's like, what, like, and I don't even know what country I'm in my own neighborhood. I don't know where I am. It's, I mean, the number of, when we go on a family walk, the number of Pakistani, Hindu, all these different, not just ethnicities, but religions with visible religious outfits on. And, the same thing, like when we go to Costco, I'm like, where am I? And so like it's rare. Like, we'll go on a family walk, and every now and then we'll pass by, a white family that's a man and a woman
Brady.
and has more.
No, we gotta let him cook.
What?
Okay.
Oh, he's about to. Oh, yeah.
He's cooking himself here. Yeah.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
And I don't even know what country I'm in my own neighborhood. I don't know where I am. It's, I mean, the number of, when we go on a family walk, the number of Pakistani, Hindu, all these different, not just ethnicities, but religions with visible religious outfits on. And, the same thing, like when we go to Costco, I'm like, where am I? And so like it's rare. Like, we'll go on a family walk, and every now and then we'll pass by, a white family that's a man and a woman and has more than one kid. And every time I see it, I'm like, I don't want to be this way. But I feel like this like small sense of relief. Like, I see you.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get to.
So my first comment is My first comment is, tell me you're a racist without saying you're a racist.
No, I was just going to say, because he was talking about people wearing religious garb or regalia, and I was like, yeah, they're not wearing the asshole starter kit that I was referring to earlier with like the cowboy boots and the blazer and the beard. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. Because they're not dressed like the guys on the stage that you know, he can't take it, you know?
My first thought was, how do the people that are on the stage with him not like get the hell up and run out of the room? Yeah, like, you sit there, you don't move, you don't look uncomfortable.
No pushback at all.
You don't look like, is he saying like, oh, hold on, guys, I got a child? Nothing.
Yeah.
This is crazy. This is absolutely nuts.
Like invasive thoughts just coming into the conversation, and you're like, what the hell? Like, is he having like a Biden moment where he just like trails off, and like, you know, I go to the swimming pool, and you know, like, you remember the Biden pool comment? It's like, you know, the next thing you know, my daughter's seeing a Hindu. Oh God, what country am I in? What the fuck are you?
Oh,
yeah, and I see your comments in the chat. Yes, now you know why I said they're saying the quiet part out loud. And he said, I don't want to be this way, but I think to myself, I'm relieved when I see a white family and they got more than one kid, because that the more than one kid part is really what really did. It's like, good, we're reproducing more, so it could be more of us.
He didn't even assume that they were a Christian family. Like, that was not even in the equation. That's absurd. It's literally absurd.
Right. Now he's going to say something like, you probably thinking like, could he ever save this? He's going to say something that I think he thinks saves what he just said from being racist. So let's listen.
I don't want to do a tirade, but I got to get this in.
Okay.
Because we have to remember that Texas wasn't always Texas.
Right.
It was once inhabited by like actual native, what we call, think about it. We call them Native Americans, but that's the name itself isn't even appropriate because it was given to them by people who came over and colonized.
Right.
So basically what I'm saying is, the idea that you could come over, commit a genocide, take something over, and then put up a wall and say, I'm going to let actual people who probably have more indigenous blood.
Hold on. You're mad at seeing real Indians as opposed to the people that Columbus thought were Indians.
Yeah, exactly. You're mad about that. And it's like, okay, the buck stops here. At some point, a couple hundred years ago, we established it as we're the guys in charge. This is what, like, the idea that even if the demographic is changing, he doesn't see that historically the demographic has changed. You know, when it became dominantly white, that wasn't how it always was.
Yeah.
It was taken by force, and you guys committed a genocide to get it to be that way. The idea that you don't, like, to say that, they probably just call me woke. They probably wouldn't even listen to what I'm saying. Yeah. You know, but it's just, I think it needs to be said, like, this idea that he's like, where am I? Yeah, you're in stolen land. Is where you're at. That's the answer to your question.
Okay, so hold on.
You shouldn't be there, you know?
Let's let him go a little bit more, because what he's going to say, I think he thinks saves that comment that he just made from being racist. And I'm going to, if you think it doesn't, I might argue with y'all a little bit. Let's just see how this goes.
I'm glad you're one of my neighbors, because at the end of the day, again, it's not about white.
Hold on, let me take it back just a little bit so we can get it all together here.
Kid, and every time I see it, I'm like, I don't want to be this way, but I feel like this like small sense of relief, like I see you. I'm glad you're one of my neighbors, because at the end of the day, again, it's not about whiteness. But at the end of the day, if things get rough, I don't know if my Hindu neighbor is going to fight to save the lives of my children.
Oh my God.
I don't know what vested interest. Like, I love this country. I'm willing to fight to defend it. a lot of people here, I don't think are. And so anyways.
How the fuck would you know that?
Yeah,
Just
you
by
don't love
looking.
the country.
Just by looking
But
at
you don't
them.
love the country. No, you don't love the country if you don't love that Hindu person. That
Right.
person very well may be a citizen. So when you're saying it's a qualify, I love my country. It's a I love people who are like me in this country.
People who look like
that's-
me,
that's-
I assume they love the country like I do. People who don't look like me,
Exactly.
I assume they don't.
Yeah.
And if that
Because
person,
there are go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Jay. Wait, finish. Yeah.
I was just saying there are plenty of Americans who don't present the way those guys on the stage present, and they're actually citizens for several generations.
Have served
So
in the
to just see
military.
somebody- yeah.
Yeah. And if they're kind of recently naturalized or made a citizen, I mean, you have to go through tests. I wonder if they know more of American history than
Right.
the average American. Because there's
Yeah.
there's a process. You have to actually get educated. So
Right.
Yeah.
Or
just
think about
crazy.
people who came here for opportunity and
Mhm.
love the opportunity that they found. And you don't think those people would love this country more than somebody who you think, oh, just because they're white like me.
Who just takes it for granted. Yeah.
Right. Like I don't understand how he doesn't see how at the very least it's xenophobic. It's prejudice. At the most, it's racism.
Yeah. I think you're bifurcating that unnecessarily. It's straight up racism. It is racism. Like if I can't call that racist, I can't call anything racist. Like, I mean, the guy, he said it out loud. He just was like, I see people who aren't white. Then he kept trying to like qualify it. It was like what we said on the episode where you're pressing on the gas and you're digging yourself deeper. Every time he tried to qualify it and make it sound less racist, it ended up sounding more racist. It was like, yo.
But this goes to the point that I was making, I think, last week on Exit Strategy about Christianity being a noble lie. Because one of the things that I do think he's speaking to that is a real concern. Think about Maslow's hierarchy, right? The lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy, the base level, is safety. Those physiological needs. If I feel unsafe, I can't worry about a lot of this other stuff. Well, these men, we talked about the insecurity that they're feeling, right? The reason why they want women under their thumb is because they feel insecure. The reason why they want this white nationalism, why I get excited when there's more white people having more kids in my neighborhood, I'm glad you're my neighbor, is because I don't feel safe. I don't know if these other people are going to fight for the country like I would. I feel unsafe. It's insecurity.
Listen, we talked about that before. Remember, we talked about how when we left Christianity, we left behind this warrior mentality where you're always fighting.
Yeah.
Like, just think about what he's thinking. Like, oh, if we got, why are you even thinking about a war? You're in Texas, for fuck's sake. You're living, you're in Costco's or whatever. Like, why are you talking about defending your kids? You're not in Gaza. Huh. How about that? You're not in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You're actually in Texas right now. Bro, just appreciate the fact
his pushback would be though, but his pushback would be, but if we don't fix the border, if we don't stop letting so many of these brown people in, I could end up being in that situation in the Congo. Think about, did you guys see what happened? There was a soccer match the other day, and they couldn't hold the gate. And before you know it, everybody stormed the gate. It wasn't like they were trying to storm the gate. The people who were holding the gate, taking tickets and all that, they just lost control. And with this whole throng of people behind them, they just ended up pushing through. And before you know it, people are running everywhere, getting into the soccer match without paying. And then you see all these racist comments on Twitter under the video talking about, this is what's happening at our border. We're letting too many of these people in. This is what's going to happen to our country. These folks think that there's a very real threat that if we don't do something at the border, the country's going to be overrun and we're not going to have an America anymore. This is what they're
just fine with paying people under the minimum wage coming from south of the border. It was only when they saw that demographically, the demographics of America are changing, that this replacement kind of fear has become huge in political rhetoric. Because what happens when you no longer have this hegemonic kind of like dominance over politics in terms of being a certain constituency, a certain demographic. Now you got to actually, the irony of this whole position is you act like it's fair for people who are not in the majority, for minority groups right now. But you don't want to be a minority yourself. What does that tell you?
Right.
What should that tell you? If you're always arguing, oh, what are the minorities complaining about? And then the main fear you have is that you're
becoming a minority.
Replaced by people.
Exactly.
That lets you know that you're saying the quiet part out loud. You know it's not fair. Because if you thought it was fair, you wouldn't mind becoming a minority. Because what happens to minorities? You would just be in a fair system.
Excellent.
But the fact that you are doing everything, you're willing to put up a ridiculous wall, you want to do everything to keep yourself. You say, you make as a parenthetical comment that you see a white man with more than one kid. It's that embedded that you're being replaced. What is that saying? You're saying, I don't want to be a minor. Why? Because you know you're not going to get a fair deal. Or at least you fear that. You fear being treated the way you're treating other people. What should that tell you? Perhaps you should just start treating people fair. But it's a genuine fear, man. It's a genuine. They didn't mind it letting people come and work in hotels and work on, orange groves and so forth.
Railroads
paying them little to nothing. And so long as they didn't see the numbers, as they started seeing where the demographics and everybody, all the political analysts, when they look at the demographics of America and they see where things are heading, they know like whatever it was in the 50s or 60s for white men in America, it's not going to be that in the future. It's just it's just going to be more diverse. Get used to it. The rest of us have been used to living within a diverse society. Get used to it. Whatever. I'm sorry. That was my second rant.
I got two more clips, but I feel like I should only do one of them. So you guys tell me which one you want to do. There's one. What's up, Jay? Go ahead.
Are we going to get? So you're really going to eliminate the other? You know what? I'll pull it up and see if I can find it. Find the thing.
So I'll just say,
playing this clip.
There's a clip where they talk about what they think it would look like if they tried to have the theonomy that they want. Theonomy where they live in a society where they get to institute biblical Old Testament, a lot of them, laws on the rest of society. There's that clip. And then ironically, the other clip is how they feel about Jewish influence on American society. So if we only had time for one of those two.
I'm choosing the former.
Choosing
the former. Yeah.
Jay Witt, you want to weigh in?
I'll go with whatever Al goes with. I'm looking for this clip. See if we can pull that up too.
All right. So that's what we'll do. That was at 56 minutes in, I believe. All right. Okay. Am I sharing my screen? I am not. Give me a second. All right. I've been enjoying this discussion, fellas. So I appreciate
it's the same here.
Your viewpoints.
No, this is great. This is great.
Your passion. All right, here they go.
Police officer pulls someone over, he's illegally detaining them. And the civil penalty for kidnapping is death. Therefore, and he was going around the church saying, oh, officer so-and-so.
I'm sorry, hold on, let me go back a little bit because they set this up. Basically, how do you get a society that's run by the kind of laws we want? We want a theonomy, which is a little different than theocracy. We want a theonomy. How do you set that up?
My sound isn't sharing, is it? Is my sound sharing?
No.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff.
Okay. You're still trying to find that clip?
I'm finding it. I'm going to find it. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? Because you just mentioned theonomy, and that would have been so good if we could have gotten to that a little.
We're about to. That's what we're about to do.
All right. Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. But if you're looking for that clip, you're not going to. I want you to be able to hear what these guys are actually saying here so you can react to it.
I'm listening. Yeah, I'm listening. And I've watched this video too. So I know. Yeah, I'm listening. I'm keeping it going.
Becomes speed limits, or whatever it may be. So that is general equity theonomy. I think.
Sorry, guys. trying to get right to what they're talking about.
I'll get.
Though is general equity theonomy, which is perfectly streamlined with both the Westminster and the 1689 Confession. The idea of, no, it's not a one-to-one ratio. It's not a one-step process, it's two. So I look, when it comes to the civil code, I look at Israel, and I'm not going to take one step, Israel to America. I'm going to take two steps, Israel back to the Decalogue and moral law, and then from there, discerning the general equity, the overarching principles, then apply it. So, where parapet around the border of the roof becomes speed limits, or whatever it may be. So that,
if you're lost in what he's talking about, he's just talking about ways to look at the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. They talk about the two books of the law. The first half are vertical.
The two tables, yeah.
Two tables of the law. The first half are vertical with man and God. The second half are horizontal, dealing with man and man. And they're talking about, basically, can you have a society that doesn't honor the first table of the law, man to God, but that honors the second half of the law, man to man? How do you get this theonomy to work in society? That's what they're talking about now.
that is general equity theonomy. I think part of the, so that's why I think it's perfectly compatible, and I haven't felt like I have to, remove my t-shirt, like I feel like I can still, without being embarrassed, say, yeah, I'm a theonomist. I love God's law. But there's a particular, that's why I was getting more into the person than the view, theonomist rather than theonomy. I do think that there's a particular type of person that gravitates towards theonomy that is sometimes overly particular and hard to work with.
Yeah, we've had to excommunicate a theonomist because he would not desist from basically insisting on saying anybody that served in the police or the military is a murderer or guilty of capital crimes, because anytime a police officer pulls someone over, he's illegally detaining them.
Yeah,
and the civil penalty for kidnapping is death. Therefore, and he was going around the church saying, oh, officer so-and-so, and we reasoned with him sternly. But we had to remove him from the church, and it was like that.
Just in-house issues that they deal with in terms of what does it look like for theonomy to be lived out. Even amongst themselves, they're saying, we're having a hard time figuring out how this thing works. We got people in our church we've had to excommunicate because they were drawing these hard lines saying, hey, if the Old Testament doesn't explicitly say you can be a police officer, you can't be a police officer. So that's just some of the in-house stuff that they're dealing with, but he's going to get to principles coming up.
But I do think that there was something there in terms of an overlap with the person and the system, where you do have like a high degree of open borders, libertarianism within the theonomic world. And what I've always heard from them is, I don't have a biblical warrant to have restrictive immigration policy the way that you're talking about. And so therefore we have to.
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious how you hear all these little kids crying in the background because they're all trying to have fucking tribes. Like, if you listen closely in the video, there are a bunch of kids crying in the audience because each one of these like fucking Nimrods are trying to produce a tribe of little kids that by the creation mandate fucking bullshit. Ridiculous.
And to me, that's so obviously contrary to the earthly good of a nation that I do like. I hear the classical two kingdoms. Hey, let's argue prudentially.
One thing I have to say, my favorite theonomist is here. His name's David Rees. I asked him that exact question with Dan Burkholder 2 nights ago, and he really did have a fantastic.
I'm assuming they have an answer.
He had a fantastic. Well,
I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit.
The question, trying to sort through these kind of questions, and it connects to the Baptist thing as well, is the idea that everything on these questions requires explicit biblical warrant is a fundamental methodological divide. So often the Baptist will say something like, where in the New Testament, often it's restricted to the New Testament, we don't consult the Old, where in the New Testament is the state authorized explicitly to promote obedience, worship, right worship.
And I'm sorry, I just want to say this too. I don't want, like, me and Jay would disagree a little bit. And I see his point that this is a very small contingent of the American population who believes the way that these guys believe, who would try to, push a program like this. But why is this important? Because I think what you're getting a look at on this stage here is you're seeing the kinds of people that would sit on the think tank of something like a Project 2025. And these are the kinds of conversations that they would have. They would bring it out to the public and have it be very, very scaled down in terms of the religious language. But behind closed doors, these are the kinds of conversations they would be having about what the Old and New Testament allows them to do to society. And then they would spell it out in a way that doesn't sound as religious, even though if you sniff hard enough, you'd be able to see, oh, wait, I know where you're getting this from. So I think it's important that you realize, as small a contingent of people as these folks are, you're getting a window into the kinds of people that want to run this country and are putting forth programs to actually do this kind of thing.
I'll push back a little, but unless maybe I won't.
Well,
I don't want to waste the audience's time, but I think you can't believe in a pluralistic society and not believe in a pluralistic society.
But they don't believe in a pluralistic society. They don't believe in a pluralistic society.
No, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about us.
Okay.
I'm saying, like, unfortunately, in a pluralistic society, you have to allow for nincompoops. You got to allow for people who believe this bullshit.
True.
And unfortunately for us, these guys are not empowered, which hopefully this video that I was hoping we'd get around to will show. Like, they don't have any real political power. And if all you can say is that they're going to be in a think tank, even though they aren't even there, I mean, I can't name a single one of them in an actual influential think tank. But if that's all we can say is they have to couch it and cover it over in secular language to try, then they're not that much of a threat. That's part of my argument. Is they're not bringing this platform to America. But that's, I'm not going to.
Project 2025 is put together by these kinds of people, and as much as Trump tried to disavow himself from it, you've already seen the reports about the people who are part of the Heritage Foundation that have been part of Trump's cabinet in the past, part of his advisor. So it's not like these people have no connections and no inroad to power.
But I think it's dangerous to fall. You can fall for the old election time, like hysteria 1 year, but to do it 5 election cycles in a row, it's almost an insanity to fall for that kind of hysteria. Like, yeah, sure, Project 2025 is probably is some bullshit, but the likelihood that it's going to cause the kind of damage that the hysteria is pointing toward engaging every election cycle, I think it's prudent for individuals in America to just look at the history books, look back at the last 3 election cycles and see how people got up in arms and thought that there was going to be a Copernican kind of shift.
I disagree, Jay Witt. I disagree. We've got stuff happening in this country right now that has never happened before. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, I think I might disagree with Jay Witt too, because who would have thought that Roe versus Wade would be overturned, right? And just the amount of levers and stuff that's going on behind the scenes. I mean, depending on how this election is going to go, I mean, the don't
Supreme Court ruling a week and a half ago that said, hey, the president cannot be tried for crimes while in office. You've never had it's not this like, hey, every election cycle hysteria. This is not that kind of thing. I don't think.
Are we saying there is no just election cycle?
No. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that that's not a thing.
Hear my question out.
Okay.
Hear my question out. Is the claim that is it an absolutist claim? Is it are you bifurcating it and saying there is no hysteria in the air at all? That's unfounded. Because if you're not claiming that, some of this is hysteria. And that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, when you look at a panel of guys who are talking this bullshit, just understand none of these guys have any real political power. And that other
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true, Jay.
The other video I was hoping that we would play is from 4 months ago, and it's got a panel of, I think it's 4 Christians who are saying exactly what I'm saying. And they are conservative Christians, and they're like, yeah, they don't have any real genuine political power. You can't.
So hold on.
Single.
Hold on. Pragmatic Crystal just threw this in the chat. 6 of Trump's former cabinet secretaries helped write or collaborated on the 900-page playbook for the second Trump term, published by the Heritage Foundation. This is what Project 2025 is. So these are not people who are not politically connected. The guys on the stage, you might not be able to show the degrees of separation between them and these former cabinet members, but I can almost assure you there is.
I don't want to. I don't want to test it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to see.
I mean, there's a certain pragmatism to my point too. It's like,
absolutely, yes.
I think the most egregious version of evangelicalism and developing a bubble of hysteria around it. Like, it's not long before you start like this guy's calling it a civilizational enemy or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's not long before you end up becoming them, is what I'm saying. Like, so seeing them as this hyper threat and just radicalizing the rhetoric around it, I don't think it's going to anyway.
Go ahead,
I was going to say was, I think it's not a matter of I understand there's a lot of hysteria, but I think that the legitimate concerns surrounding what is going on, and this is all documented, right? This is like, we can actually see this, like, that's being written out on paper. Now, the methodology is that Trump is going to implement these things from an executive standpoint. Whether or not he can do that, what the legal bounds of that is or are or will be, I think that's whether or not we're going to create any kind of rhetorical hysteria around it is really not the point. The point is, I don't want to see him try. And I think we could speak everyone like that. I think that speaks for a lot of people, including Brady.
Obviously, I agree with you. I agree with that. I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's not like I'm on the other side of this argument.
And just so you know, I don't disagree with you in principle. I just don't know that your principle applies to this particular case, because I'm not just focused on these guys on the stage. Like I said a minute ago, to me, these guys on the stage, this is just a window into the kinds of people who are trying to pull off something like a Project 2025. So to me, I don't look at these guys and say, oh, it's just them. We don't have to worry about them. We're living through what people like them are.
I'm just arguing that if you look at where this rhetoric leads to, you conflate them into the Republican, and then you're going to be conservatives in America. Like, liberals have to get over that. Conservatives have to get over the fact, if you can't live in a pluralistic, you can't live in a two-party like society system like this and not recognize that there are going to be people on the other side. And if we take the most egregious examples of people on the other side and we make them the federal head for the other side and develop all of our hysteria around the most egregious examples of conservatism, you actually tear down the wall for just dialogue.
So you're basically saying we're crying fire in the theater right now, or you're trying to keep us from doing that.
I'm just saying people need to act like adults and have some sense. Like, it's not smart to take a small portion of a party and characterize the entire party by the most egregious.
No, but I don't think anyone's characterizing the party by that, even though you do have a part. Like, I don't know how much political punditry you watch.
Punditry, right.
You have very many Republicans saying this is not the Republican Party anymore. There's nothing conservative about what these people are trying to get the government to do. Right? This is not small. Anytime you start talking theonomy, you're not talking small government anymore. That's not conservative principles. So even within the conservative
but
party,
theonomy's been around since the 80s. Let's be real. Theonomy's been around since the 70s and 80s.
If
like, these people have been writing books.
Right. But if you don't see the traction that's being gained here, I don't know what to tell you on that part. Like,
no. What I see now is we have the internet. We have the ability for divisive rhetoric to generate more ad dollars. We have the ability for hysteria to get people on their phones about their neighbors and just like, oh, they're trying to take over the world. Like, no, bro, it's not going to happen. Okay. It's not going to happen. That's all I'm saying. It's like, all right, calm down, go get yourself some coffee. It's going to be all right.
To make Jaywood a prophet, what has to happen though is we do need to motivate people to vote, because if more people think, this would never happen, by thinking that way and then acting accordingly, you actually do create a situation where this actually could happen. So part of this message is we do need to motivate and get out the vote. I don't care what the hell Joe Biden's psychological profile is right now. We cannot have someone in office who's going to give an ear or platform to people who think like this. And we talked about this on Exit Strategy. Go ahead.
Just consider the idea of what a democracy is. We live in a democracy. If we can keep it, remember that the end of that phrase, a democracy. If you can keep it. What I'm saying is, if we legitimately lose, if the left loses legitimately to conservatives, that you can't say I believe in a democracy and I only want my side to be in charge all the time. I'm saying if you actually believe in democratic principles and they win fair and square, you're going to have to figure out how to get along with life in a society where the conservatives are in charge.
But Jay Witt, you're talking about a past world, yo. You just had a president 4 years ago who lost an election and he told you beforehand he would not agree to a peaceful transfer of power if he lost. And the party is platforming that same person. What you're talking about and these are people who are literally saying, you know what? I actually would kind of be okay with a dictatorship. So this idea of a democracy that you're saying, hey, if this was what you say you want, you got to allow the other side to win. But the other side is not saying we want democracy.
What I'm saying is, I actually qualified my statement by saying, if he wins, if he gets enough of his constituency to go out to the polls and vote, and he actually legitimately wins, he won.
Right.
It is what it is.
No, but it's not. It is what it is. It's going to become something that it's never been.
Something else. It's going to be that he's never been.
It's not. It is what it is. It's not. It's not that kind of.
Let's bring up the other video, please. I already found the guy. Let's bring the video. Okay. I found it.
What's the timestamp? We'll end on this other video.
I think the conversation we're having right now, this isn't a very important. I always, even when we are on Nurture or whatever, I'm always saying like, yo, we just have to recognize we don't want to care. That's part of our steel manning. Like, you don't do your side any good by straw manning the other side. And one way to straw man the other side is to take the most egregious and terrible example of them and say that's representative. Right, that's not what you're claiming.
Right. But what I am claiming, though, is even people on the other side are recognizing that within their party, there is this faction that they're saying we cannot afford to have that's what the Lincoln Project, right? The Lincoln Project is conservatives, Republicans who are saying something's happening in our party that's going to change America. So this is not me characterizing the other side a certain way. It's saying.
I also think that it's important that people understand that skeptic does not mean you're a liberal necessarily. True. You could be like socially conservative and a skeptic. Like, just understand, like, we don't want to conflate. We don't want to, like, I haven't talked about my own political views. I'm not a conservative, by the way, but just in case somebody thinks that's why I'm arguing and kicking back. I just think it could do damage to, you could reach more people with just the principles of skepticism if you don't tether it to some very specific political ideology where a person feels like they have to buy into that along with debunking the Bible or something like that. And I don't want to even assume that the entire audience for Ichabod is all liberal. They might not be. And I wouldn't want to do them a disservice by characterizing what they believe as being this. You see what I'm saying? You
No,
understand what I'm trying to get at here?
I definitely got you. And I think I'm with you 100% there. What I'm not with is
most of us probably are liberal. Most of the people
right.
who follow Ichabod and who support us probably are. But if you happen to be conservative, I don't want you to feel like you don't have a place here. Like,
oh no,
you're welcome.
Anybody who may have been getting that, I'm glad you're making the point that you're making. The point that
Right.
I'm pushing back, and I think Al too is pushing back against, is that this is no real concern. Like, this is nothing to really be worried about, because there's such a, well, let me play the video, because you think the video is going to actually make the point that you're trying to.
Well, I just think, like, in the service of still manning Christians, I think it would be good to get some actual Christian authors and smart guys who are intellectuals who are basically saying the same thing I'm saying.
I could talk about Daryl Hart, because Daryl Hart wrote a book called Secular Faith, where he actually directly tries to attack Doug Wilson. Right. He has a theology that he says that he doesn't think that the New Testament or the Old Testament even supports having the kind of theonomic views or Reconstructionist views like to be legitimate at all. So I'm happy to talk about that as well. Yeah.
J-Bit, what's the timestamp on this video?
All right, let's go to 5 minutes and 30 seconds in, and then there's 6:30. So 5 minutes and 30, 6:30. So the first is a discussion. The first is a discussion about theonomy.
All right, and we got it.
What he's talking about. Go ahead.
No, nothing. Okay, here it goes. You should see it coming up in 5, 4, 3, 2. Here we go.
Christian nationalists. A lot of times immigration policy is behind that, and behind that is a concern with globalism. And so I do think we are in an interesting moment. I think the Christian nationalism discussion reminds me a lot of the economy discussion.
Right.
Yeah, I just didn't introduce the guy. I'm sorry. This is
I was going to ask you about that.
I think this is Ligon Duncan. I think.
Oh, Ligon Duncan. Wow.
Ligon
he
Duncan.
got older.
And on his left is Philip Ryken. Both of those guys are prolific authors and theologians who are educated. I think Philip Ryken was educated at Oxford. Ligon Duncan, I think he was he over the Southern Baptist at one point? I know seminary. I just know like Duncan is considered to have like basically a photographic memory. He's a student of history. These are intelligent men on this panel. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. Where am I?
And so I do think we are in an interesting moment. I think the Christian nationalism discussion reminds me a lot of the old theonomy discussion in the 1970s and 80s, but it's a very different sociological situation. 70s and 80s, you have the rise of sort of social conservatives in the Republican Party, the rise of the influence of evangelicalism in politics. Carter is elected, and one of the major magazines does the Year of the Evangelical and all this kind of stuff. Within that movement, the Reconstruction movement, the Theonomy movement, is sort of part of that right-wing wave that's growing up, wanting to influence the culture with Christian virtues, ideals, principles, laws, etc. Today, the Christian nationalism group, I really think, represents a sense of the loss of influence in culture. It represents a tiny, tiny, politically uninfluential group. I mean, what governor, senator, congressman is out there advocating for anything like Christian nationalism, or who would be open to that? You remember when the laws were being debated in Uganda regarding LGBTQIA rights, even the most conservative members of the U.S. Congress would not touch it at all. And so what we're seeing now is a discussion about Christian nationalism that there's no possibility of any real public effect on it in terms of public policy, government, et cetera. Who are the people that are advocating for it that are actually involved in government? And that, to me,
Is there much more? Because I think
yes. Can you keep playing it? Yes.
Okay.
He's finishing off. Yep.
Okay.
I think that means that with at least some people that will utilize the label, they're more concerned with building a subculture within the church that advocates for certain ideals and excludes other people that don't advocate for those ideals, rather than actually influencing the way we operate as a commonwealth, as a nation, as a republic. So I do think the sociological situation.
Okay. Remember we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I said I think Trump needs the right wing, and the right wing needs Trump. Trump needs them to get the ego boost and the power that he desires from being elected. Like, that's why he ran in the first place. He needs them. He needs to appease them. Well, they need him as a puppet for their program. They can't have the power that they would have never gotten the Supreme Court justices. They would have never gotten some of the things they got unless they had a puppet who didn't have like I said, Trump is not an ideologue. So he needs ideas from people who have the ideas, people who have the ideology. So he's an empty bag without them, but they're powerless without him. And so I think everything that Lincoln Duncan is saying here, I think he also was talking about a former world, not the world that we're living in right now.
Thoughts, Jay Witt?
Jay Witt, you
I
there?
feel like I would just yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were out for a bit. Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you now.
I feel like I'll just leave it there. I'll leave it there. I mean,
Okay.
I'll leave it for the
So
audience to think
in the
about
chat,
it.
let's ask in the chat, in the comments, for those who are in the chat and those who are going to watch it later in the comments, what do you think? Do you think that is it hysteria? Is it overblown concern, or are we right to be concerned? Would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Also, hopefully we have a subtle audience. This audience is more like, understand, I'm not saying that there isn't any legitimate concerns here. I'm saying how much percentage of this is actual hysteria that comes around every election cycle, and we can time it. We can basically time it. You know it's going to be in the air on some, like, how much of it is that? How much of it is an actual existential threat, essentially? You know, how much can we even tell? I'm just saying, I've been around for enough election cycles to you're not getting me with that. I have actual work to do. I have a life to live. You're not going to have me up online arguing with everybody. It's not going to happen.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Hey, great conversation, fellas.
Yep.
It's been over 2 hours, and we're going to let people go back to their wonderful lives. And we definitely appreciate you for rocking with us. If there's anything else that we need to cover, maybe we'll come back and pick it up next week if there's something that we feel like we missed. But talk to us in the comments. What resonated with you? What did you agree? What did you disagree with? Yes, rock out with the organs. Albert, Kim, thank you for joining us midweek. Definitely appreciate you.
Pleasure.
You guys have a great week, and we'll catch you
sir.
next time. Love and logic.
Indeed.
Peace.
Yes, sir.